Days Gone is a post-apocalyptic game, a fresh and unique idea that has never once been done before. Welcome to a really bad review of Days Gone. On a serious note though, just because of the game's fairly saturated genre, it doesn't mean it can't be a good game. Oh, by the way, I've written the review with the intent of not revealing any spoilers. However, the footage included might have some minor quest spoilers and things like that, but hopefully nothing that would tarnish your experience of the game. Either way. The story of Days Gone follows the main protagonist Deacon, or Deke for short, 2 years after the pandemic occurred, as he journeys through his life surviving one day at a time, making a living as a part-time bounty hunter, freak killer and professional errand runner? As a drifter in this post-apocalyptic time, you work to uncover the mysteries of the new world you are faced with, coming across different survivors with varying philosophies, government organisations and other drifters like yourself, whilst trying to unravel things from the past that might not have happened quite as everyone thinks. The game features a generous cast of characters, some with bit parts and others that are integral to the story. You have several main camps, all of which you have access to at different points in the game. Carrying out errands for members increase your respect to that particular camp, which rewards you with credits that you can spend on purchasing new equipment and upgrades. Actually building relationships isn't as important as the game makes out it is, and it generally happens with the story progression. Apart from this, the story follows a fairly conventional post-apocalyptic plot. There's plenty of highs and lows, and although it's slow to start and definitely didn't draw me in straight away, I'm glad I persevered as it became much more fleshed out with time. One negative I did take note of was a few hours into the game where you relive the opening events. I understand for the sake of the narrative why this was done, but nothing really changed. And I'm not talking about the facts of the story, as in nothing was changed. It's literally a repeat of the opening cutscene. You have to sit and watch the opening cinematic again as part of a flashback. Even though you only saw it less than 4 or 5 hours prior, I really couldn't quite wrap my head around why they didn't at least change the perspective of the way it was told or showed some extra information that may have been happening in the background. But nope, just the same cutscene, you know, because content. Despite being somewhat predictable and not particularly unique, it still did enough to maintain my interest, especially after the somewhat slow start, but you know what isn't predictable? The graphics! And performance, you'll understand why I mentioned that soon enough. Okay, so let me get the good stuff out of the way with first. You might be sitting here thinking, hold on a second, I can see the game footage on screen and it looks pretty nice. And damn straight, it is nice. The textures are well detailed, the environments look great and the character models are all fairly presentable despite not really changing with circumstances such as getting damaged and stuff like that. In fact, considering how expansive the game actually is, it's really impressive how much the developers Bend Studio actually managed to squeeze into the game. Areas like this where the lighting is nice and bright really show off the true potential of Days Gone, and it was these moments that made me really appreciate this game. But it wasn't the general aesthetic I had an issue with, it was the package that it came bundled in. You see, this is the line where graphics and gameplay cross over, and unfortunately one affects the other here, and I'm not sure which one was poorly implemented and has let down the other. For now, as this is down to a variety of factors, I'm going to keep it in the graphics section of the review as it has more impact on your visual experience of the game than anything.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your lollipops. I present to you Days Gone!
Possibly one of the most buggy AAA titles released in 2019. Which is crazy because the bloody thing came with a 30 gig update on release day. 30 gig! Why is this happening? 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 It took me less than 1 day to get this footage without even trying, just playing through the game normally. And this isn't even close to all of it. It certainly isn't the best looking game of this console generation, but it makes a good case for being one of the more respectable ones. Until this rubbish started occurring on a regular basis. Going from this to this isn't a nice transition, and unfortunately this isn't where the issues end. What is the torch attached to here? Who knows? I get that it needs to follow the player's view, but you know, Make the character turn so it looks like the torch is attached to him or somewhere or something. This is just lazy. The textures are still loading here, even though the game still continues. I'd recommend adding more loading screens so the PlayStation has time to catch up with this stuff, but after the ordeal of waiting for the initial loading screen, I don't think I want to see that bloody spinning ring ever again. I realise it's a large game in terms of data, but this is the actual loading time when you boot the game up. Feel free to skip this, by the way, because it takes a while. I do feel I'm being very harsh in certain aspects here. I can make my peace with the loading times, to be honest, and the textures loading in late don't really bother me too much. These are more down to the constraints of the PS4, which is very late in its life cycle now, and this game really does push the console to the edge. Seriously. My PS4 sounded like the runway at Gatwick Airport with no drone interference. The game in general looks really nice, but the visual side becomes less immersive when you are constantly surrounded by glitches and god awful frame rate drops. Look at these! Seriously, look! My poor PlayStation cannot handle this game, and the developers should have known this. Honestly, if you have a PS4 Pro, I actually envy you, because these were some of the lowest frame rates on a consistent basis I've ever experienced on the PlayStation. Days Gone is a perfect example of an artist working with poor tools. I hate to say it, but Ben's studio were too ambitious. They should have known better, and if I'm honest, they've paid the price for it. Speaking of ambitious,
the gameplay!
One thing I find more soul destroying than anything in the gaming world is constant reminders and tutorials of how to carry out basic tasks, and Days Gone is no exception. Yes, some of them are unnecessary evil and there's no getting around that, but I swear, the constant interruptions early game from the in-play tutorials and hints were so annoying. It was a constant barrage of information. Just implement areas or tasks to put these tutorials to use rather than just throwing pop-ups and text at me. It's annoying and it detaches you from the gameplay. Just let me play the game. Anyway, with that rant over, we can get into the main bulk of the gameplay, which for all intents and purposes is actually really good. Like the rest of the game, it's very ambitious, utilising a large variety of mechanics and systems. You have personal upgrades to your character that work using an experience point system from completing tasks and missions. You can buy upgrades and customizations for both your bike and weapons which work with credits. Again, these are earned from completing missions. You also earn respect with each camp following the same formula, however each camp often has slightly varying options available, especially when it comes to upgrading your bike. So if you're someone that likes to 100% their games, Days Gone will offer you a lot of gameplay. On the other hand, if you're someone who is more in it just for the story, then you might have a very different experience. Whilst the story is fairly well told with strong character development, like I said, it isn't entirely unique, and if you aren't massively interested in getting 100%, then like me, you might find some of the side missions more of a tedious distraction than good quality content. There is a lot of game here to play, but I did find a lot of what was outside the main story quite frustrating, as it was mostly spent walking around searching for supplies just to complete fairly simple tasks like burning out nests at infestation zones. That being said, for the most part, the gameplay is really quite good. From crafting and upgrading to range combat and melee combat, Days Gone really offers you a well-rounded experience. Nothing is overly complex, it's all quite straightforward. You can craft new items on the go, or you can purchase items back at the camp, but if you choose to, you can get by with what you find. The main weapon that I utilised for most of the entire game, I picked up from an enemy, and as ammo was fairly common for it, it served me well, saving me credits for other purchases. It's nice to have the option to play out the game as you want. You know what doesn't play out as you want though? The motorbike. You know how long it took me to master this shiznick? Between the rubbery controls chucking you left and right, the constant and awkward angled bends, tight spaces and horrid frame rate drops, I found most of my early game was spent trying to use all my scraps to repair my damn bike. I love the inclusion of the bike. I thought it was a nice idea, but I really don't like how it controlled. Don't get me wrong, I did get used to it, but it doesn't make it any less rubbery to drive around, and in a game riddled with glitches, something a little more rigid would probably have served a better purpose here. I applaud Bend Studios for everything they included in this game. There's a lot here, it's all straightforward but worth using, the mechanics are mostly decent and there is a variety in your choice. Areas such as the NPC's field of vision was frustrating and unclear at times, and there were other slightly less polished areas, but on a whole it was fun and had its share of intense moments. Speaking of intense moments, drumroll please. It's time for the summary.
The story!
7 out of 10. A tried and tested formula. Nothing particularly innovative, but a mostly good narrative, strong character development and good casting helped round it off nicely.
The graphics!
6.5 out of 10. Looked really nice, but loses a point for higher volumes of glitches, bugs and frame rate drops. Can't say much more really.
The gameplay!
7 out of 10. Ambitious and mostly well executed. A variety of mechanics and different systems, just feels a little unpolished in places.
The post-apocalyptic effect!
4.5 out of 10. I think this genre puts out some of the best story-based games out there, but it isn't exactly a new spin on the idea, so it kind of was a bit of a letdown there. And overall it's a 6.5 out of 10. A decent game with a lot of potential it just didn't quite fulfill. Would have been happy just to wait longer for the developers to polish it off, but hey, extra points for the size of the project I guess. If you made it this far, thanks for watching the review. I tried to smash this game out as kind of as fast as possible without missing any of the game out really. Yeah, be sure to subscribe. There'll be obviously new videos coming soon. I've got Twitter. No one ever follows me on it, but hey, you can do that if you want. Yeah, thanks.